working on ventures and ideas in the climate resilience, mitigation, impact space. And then I also currently a fractional CEO for a startup that called CareMiles that is building e-commerce solutions to support tree planting. And we actually do that through a partnership with MasterCard through their Priceless Planet Coalition. And we're focusing on working with businesses in Southeast Asia to facilitate reforestation and tree planting. So that's kind of my background. I wear a lot of different hats in the climate space. So I kind of bring that perspective to the table today. I wanted to go over some baseline data with you guys before I get into the meat of the conversation. Let me just, here we go. Can you guys see my screen here? Do you see this?
Yes.
Great. All right. So for those of you that are familiar with the climate space, you're going to be familiar with Project Drawdown. It's a great resource. It's one of the foundational resources that people ask me, I'm thinking about getting into climate. Where do I start? Great place to start your journey. Project Drawdown, they have excellent resources. And this basically is at the highest level, the roadmap of where we can get to and how we get to net zero by pick your date, 2040, 2050, 2060, whatever the yardstick is, hopefully by 2050. But this is basically how we get to net zero. And on the left-hand side, we've got like the emissions that we pull and consume. And on the right-hand side, we've got what the natural world, what the Earth's ecosystem basically pulls out of the atmosphere that we push into the atmosphere. So you can think of it as an equation. This is at the highest level, the roadmap to getting to net zero. And essentially every innovation has to plug into either side of this equation. So for example, I do a lot of work with Sunrun. They're the largest battery installer and solar system installer in the United States for houses. They are on that orange on the left-hand side, electricity production. I also, like I said, I work with CareMiles, which we're trying to facilitate tree planting at scale. That's on the right side of the equation. So you can think of a bathtub analogy where you've got water coming in, water flowing out. We're trying to keep that equilibrium to get us to net zero. All right, so I did a quick search of the term climate innovation worldwide using Google Trends. And you can see here that that term sort of just bounced around for a few years. I backdated it to 2010. And between 2010 and 2014, not much change. It's kind of hovered around that marker. Paris Agreement, COP21, has really set the stage for global standards. That happened in 2015. And you can see after that, interest around climate innovation slowly started to mark upwards, but it really wasn't until really midway through the pandemic where the idea of climate innovation really took off. And you can see essentially a quadrupling over the last 4 years in the amount of searches around the climate innovation terminology. So, I kind of teased out what I think are 4 broad trends that are driving this phenomenon of why climate innovation is on the rise. Number 1, proliferation of ecosystems supporting early stage founders has basically mainstreamed this idea of becoming a founder in the climate space as a legitimate career avenue. So today we're going to be talking about what's the landscape happening with regard to climate innovation specifically globally, but also we're also trying to set the stage for how that has actually has positioned maybe people coming out of college, coming out of grad schools, early professionals, like the whole idea of being a founder and starting something new and being an innovator has really been, I'd say it's something that's emerged in the last 5 or 10 years in a real way. Prior to that, it was pretty hard to create something new, primarily because the resources and the ecosystems didn't exist. So we're going to be talking about that. Fun fact, over 20,000 investments in startups have been made by accelerated programs in the US over the last 10 years. That's a lot, 20,000. Okay, number 2, acceleration and diversification of capital available to early stage climate stage founders has absolutely just exploded. And it's not just the amount. We're going to talk about some of the stats around the amount of capital that's flowing into the climate space, but it's the variation. It's the types of access to capital. There's the pitch competitions, accelerator funding, grant making, place-based investing. Angels now are like high net worth individuals that have made a lot of money. They're providing a lot of pre-seed for very early stage founders. There's traditional VC now has really gotten into the clean tech space after sort of their some of the bruises they faced 10 years ago on sort of climate clean tech 101 funding cycle. And then the private equity is actually starting to provide more mature level capital to B, C, D stage ventures. Okay, so according to PwC, over 260 billion has been invested in the climate tech startups since 2018, and 50 billion of that came in just 2022 alone. Is that a big number? Is that a small number? We're gonna talk about that. Number three, technology is democratizing knowledge and access to resources. So it's not just technology like this where a lot of us can get together and network and talk about and spread knowledge. So certainly, the pandemic has accelerated the acceptance of Zoom and other online sharing technologies, but there's a whole lot of resources out there that basically enables early stage founders to mimic the Silicon Valley experience. So you've got content distribution, peer collaboration, access to mentoring, cheaper product development, free and reduced resources and tools like Microsoft for startups, Google for cloud startups, Stripe, Atlas, all these tools that are either free or very inexpensive for founders to just get going. Another fun fact for this one, Y Combinator's free online library has been accessed 12 million times by aspiring entrepreneurs across 185 countries since its launch in 2005. So essentially, 10, 15 years ago, when I started a venture, you pretty much either had to have the built-in network through either undergrad or like grad school that you just to be able to know what you don't know so you can ask the right questions and kind of get your venture going. Now you can literally get up to speed in a fairly sophisticated way within like 4 weeks with all the proliferation of resources online. And then the final trend here is, and this is the obvious one, right? We talked about COP and the Paris Agreement. Urgency of climate action is worsening. We're seeing it every day, and the growing mainstream awareness of a climate crisis. Paris Agreement, COP, ESG investing with publicly traded companies, the new SEC rule. That's something I actually worked on 15 years ago. Finally glad to see it come to fruition. Insurance policies, claims are going up, costs are going up, and policies are getting canceled. A handful of insurance companies, for those of you that live in California, they've pulled out of California, or they pulled out certain markets of California just because they can't face that risk exposure. And then proliferation of EV adoption. We've kind of passed that inflection point, and that's particularly important in the U.S. context because transportation, unlike other countries, for the U.S. is a huge contributor for greenhouse gas emissions. So another fun fact here, in 2022 Pew Research study, 76% of people surveyed across 19 advanced economies agreed that climate change is a major threat to their nation, up 8% just 4 years prior into 2018. All right, so how many climate ventures are out there? Well, it's impossible to say, really. So I went and did some research to try to pull together some estimates from what I thought were pretty established resources and credible sources. PwC, in a 2021 report, they estimated about 2,000 climate tech startups globally. CB Insights, which is a great resource for those of you that are trying to dig into the space, they estimate at 3,600 active climate tech companies worldwide. I would probably put the highest level of weight on that source. World Economic Forum did a 2021 analysis. They estimated about 1,000. That's probably on the low end. And then Crunchbase has about 5,000, but they're probably casting the most broad net in terms of what constitutes a climate or climate tech startup. Okay, so I think it's fair to say we're probably somewhere in the 3,000 to 5,000 range in terms of legitimate startups that are pursuing climate mitigation, resilience, adaptation in some form or another. But even though money is flowing in to the climate innovation space at a pretty rapid pace, we're seeing a two to 4x increase over the last 2 years. We need to get $2.4 trillion of funding is needed each year through 2030 to even have a realistic chance of getting to our Paris goals. Bloomberg, which is a terrific resource, has done a lot of research on this, and they estimate their initial estimate from 2023 puts funding at 1.6 trillion, right? So that's quite a bit of a shortfall, 1.6 to 2.4, what we need to be spending to get to our global goals. But that is up from their estimated 1.1 trillion in 2022. So on the good side, we're heading in the right direction. Unfortunately, we're not. The speed and acceleration of capital inflows is not going fast enough. IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has catalyzed about 380 billion in direct funding. Some estimates, Goldman Sachs estimates that could be as high as 1.4 trillion in additional funding that's flowing into the climate space as a result of IRA, specifically in the US. That's wonderful. That's going to help close the gap, but we're not there yet. And then I'll get to that later. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to turn over to. Let me stop share. All right. So I have some questions for my esteemed panelists, but your questions are more important. So we are going to be using the Q&A chat function. So I'm going to be monitoring that. You can drop your questions in there. Please upvote questions that you want to see, and we'll field those in real time for our panelists. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get into some intros. First off, we've got Anu Sanghvi. She is the founder and CEO of The Greenhouse. It's an accelerator in the Bay Area that focuses specifically on women climate founders. So she's going to be bringing that perspective to the conversation today. I also have Tim Wolters, who's a former colleague. I used to be director of innovation for Tim at his startup called CrowdSolve, which is a platform supporting early stage founders to build climate ventures. And they have, I don't know what the current number is, but over 300 ventures from around the world that they're supporting to achieve their particular goals. And then finally, I've got Allison Myers, who's the founder and CEO or managing partner at Buoyant Ventures. And she specializes in software and light hard tech around early stage. So I guess seed and Series A. So we're going to kind of learn more about that. So Anu, let's get started with you. We're going to kind of go around real quickly here. I want just tell me about your journey. What were you doing before you got in the climate space? What got you into the climate space? Kind of tell me how you're sitting here today.
Great, thank you. And just one point of clarification, I'm the co-founder of The Greenhouse. My wonderful partner, Anya Lamb, and I are joint in the hip.
Great, thanks for that clarification.
So I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in India, in the city of Calcutta. And so climate consciousness was ingrained in us from the very early days. 40% of the 14 million population lives on the streets. And so when the monsoon floods come in the summertime, like all those houses get wiped away. So on the one hand, you see the extreme impact of harsh climate patterns. And then on the other hand, you see the power of communities and people coming together and lifting each other up. So that's the environment that I was raised in. Fast forward to 2022, when I had my eureka moment, I was head of product and design at Sunbasket. And we were excited to bring healthy, organic meals straight from the farm into people's busy lives, thinking about food waste and reducing waste around packaging and all those good problems, when I got that dreaded HR call. And I heard that my role was eliminated. And so I found myself at a crossroads saying, where do I go next? What do I do? And as a product manager, you tend to chase problems. And so I started thinking about climate and the orange skies in California. And before I knew it, I was enrolled in the Terra program, went through 12 weeks of deep learning about the climate landscape, and invite anyone who hasn't taken advantage of that program to please do so. It was life-altering for me. Coming out of that, I thought I was going to go find a head of product role at a climate tech startup. So keep the same function, just pivot industries. And unfortunately, none of the doors opened for me at that moment. And so I started thinking about what else could I do with my skill sets? I wasn't a mechanical engineer. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not a funder. Like, what else? What other role could I play? And so I started going to a lot of happy hours, met Anya at one of them, and we started talking about our three passions: women empowerment, climate, and innovation. And out of that, the greenhouse was born.
Thank you for that whirlwind introduction. You've come a long way. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, we know each other. We're reuniting here. Tim, I like to. You have an interesting story. It's kind of similar to mine on the precipitating cause of what really pushed us in take that last step into the climate space. You had an exchange with your son on the way to school one day. Why don't you get started by telling the audience about that? You need to unmute.
Yeah, it's not wasn't allowing me to unmute. I've started 3 software companies in the past, and I was looking around at what my next venture might be, and I was actually taking my son to school. He's a senior in high school now, but he was in 8th grade, so I was taking him to middle school, and we were listening to an NPR episode on climate change, and he turns to me before he gets out of the car and says, "Dad, I don't think I'm going to live to be as old as you are today because of climate change." As parents, that kind of grabs you. That's a visceral moment, and I decided at that point to get into the work of helping out with climate change. And the biggest lever that I knew of in my experience is starting up companies and the power of the markets to help drive both sustainable economically and sustainable for our planet innovation that could really drive change.
And Tim, just quickly, you have a computer science background, so you've always focused on SaaS kind of products, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Allison, so Tim and I met Allison. I think we knocked on her door because when we were at CrowdSolve, we were in the process of talking to VCs, trying to raise money for CrowdSolve. And she very graciously took our call and had a meeting with us. And I was like, well, Allison's a very, very nice for a venture capitalist. Like, she's very, very friendly. Not to paint them with a broad brush or anything, right? Okay, so Allison, so you co-founded Buoyant.
Yeah.
Before you kind of talk to us about why you co-founded and what you're sort of trying to do, what your secret sauce is with Buoyant, how did you get into even just becoming a VC in the first place, and how did you get in the venture capital space? I mean, into the climate space?
Yeah, it all sort of ties together, and taking calls with founders is kind of VC's job. So I hope everyone's nice about it. It's part of the game, and it's also one of the most fun parts. But so I'll put my LinkedIn here too for everyone. But I live in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in rural Colorado. Originally, spent a lot of time in the outdoors. Absolutely love it. And so climate and outdoors have always been very close to my heart. But when I started working, the first thing I did was join a startup. It was a health tech startup. So not related to climate, but still with that passion of wanting to do something, have a bit more of a purpose at work. And but that really drove me in a lot of ways very early in my career. And at business school, I then worked with the Michigan Social Venture Fund and the Acumen Fund, knowing that I did not want to go back into healthcare. When I went into consulting, I fell in, I will say, a bit into the energy space. I worked across energy, mobility, and the built environment quite a bit during my time there. But I'm convinced now maybe I should have been an engineer. I loved the technical side of all the work that we were doing with utilities, and the grid is such an amazing asset that we I think take for granted a lot with terms like flip of a switch. It is not that easy, I will tell you. But truly a true passion from like growing up and loving the outdoors so much, as well as just this huge technical sort of achievement that we have broadly around what we've built in our world and how do we keep both at the same time. So my co-founder, Amy, and I met I had been at Accenture a while, almost a decade, and really had seen the shift around climate change with senior executives going from, I don't want to talk about climate change, like that's gotten super political in the US, to, oh, wow, this is a huge risk to my business. And then finally, this is something that is also an opportunity. I see now that there is a game of chess being played, and there are pieces moving around it, and there are opportunities and risks. And that was truly when I think I saw the opportunity there for Buoyant. And I happened to meet Amy at the same time, who had the background in venture. And there was always sort of this amazing idea in my background of, I love the spirit and the energy from startups, and combining that with the more deep technical expertise and consulting background that I had for Accenture, and cheers to the other Accenture person I saw just comment, that was just a dream come true. So I was super excited to sort of kick off very beginning of 2020, starting Buoyant, thinking, the world was our oyster, at least for a few months, but an interesting story from then as well. But yes, it all ended up working out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allison. And so maybe I'll kind of reverse order back to you, because actually the question we got from, and I said I would take participant questions and we'll prioritize those. So that's what we're going to do here. The one that seems to be getting the most up, actually that's just changed, but I'll stick with the first one. So Allison, this will go to you. How have VCs progressed under gender BIPOC investments since their height in the Silicon Valley? Is it still an old boys network for climate startups, or is the climate space for VC different than other verticals in the VC landscape?
Yeah, it is a little different, I think, in the VC landscape. Not much, but a little, and it also depends on geography. You actually see an increase in representation across women and underrepresented founders broadly, both in climate as well as in areas outside of the Bay in New York, which I think is very fascinating. Powerhouse, I believe, did some of this analysis as well as others. I will find it and send it off to Rob afterwards. But there's some of it. It is still a bit of an old boys club, because as you get into later and later stages, they care less about what industry you are necessarily in. And because climate tech can be a catch-all for anything that is more efficient at times, it does, end up sort of meshing together with everything else. But I do think, if you're more aware as a sort of investor, then this is typically a more collaborative space, I'd say. So maybe that's why I'm nicer as a VC. But also there's a little bit more of inclusion broadly as well.
Great. Just so everyone knows, I actually dropped a bunch of links into the chat. So links to our respective stuff that's going on, and I'll be dropping other links in as we progress in the conversation in real time. Thank you. Anu, I want to hear from you. So on your website, you make a very provocative statement, which I agree with, but you say women are better leaders in tackling crisis situations. First of all, I love how you're leaning into being provocative right off the bat. That's great. I actually, just a little tangent here. I did my undergrad, my graduate first master's research in working on microenterprise in northern India. So I was very familiar at the time with the work of Mohammed Yunus at the Grameen Bank. And one of the brilliant things that he came up with 25 years ago, which he ended up winning the Nobel Prize for Economics for, is basically figuring out the thing that everyone from a lot of those developing cultures and villages knew, is women are the centerpiece and kind of keep the family on track. And so empowering women, providing them access to capital outside of the traditional formal sector, is a great method of economic empowerment and community development. So I 100% agree with that statement. But I just wanted to, in terms of how there's a lot of accelerators out there, right? In the US, there's at least, I would say, 100, 150 climate specific accelerators. How does the greenhouse differentiate itself? Maybe you do that by leaning into provocative statements such as this, but tell me kind of the competition and sort of how do you separate yourself from what others are doing and how you kind of figure all that out?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So the greenhouse is a collaborative innovation program. We are pre-accelerator. And our entire reason for being is because we looked around at a couple of those accelerators, and we didn't find one that sort of aligned with our guiding values and what we were hoping to bring into this world. And I want to start by just highlighting that each of us, right, regardless of our gender, has two sort of dominant energy forces inside of us. There's the yang, sort of more masculine, more dominant, more aggressive culture that, energy that has sort of created the human world that we live in. And then there's the yin, the more sort of collaborative, the more nurturing, which has been subdued it's shown up in the kitchen table, but not so much on the board table and the innovators table, and certainly not at the COP29 organizing table, which was all men when it started until a couple of women communities spoke up. And you look at what's happening in the world, we're not moving fast enough, even though we have all the solutions that, we're not executing as fast as we should be to meet the size, the magnitude of the problem. And if you think about like nature and how, nature doesn't have one dominant tree, right? There's diversity, and that's what helps nature thrive. There's locality, like local, trees will produce oxygen that is consumed locally. They don't transport that oxygen across the globe. So there's so many lessons to be learned from nature. And we're trying to bring those principles and that earth-centered, feminine-inspired leadership style into our innovation program to help women that are either found curious, who are sitting on the sidelines saying, ooh, this climate innovation arena looks scary. It looks, it's not meant for me, right? It's not designed for me. We're trying to pull them in gently, nourishing and nurturing their way into this world, as well as women who are early in their journeys. They have an idea, maybe they've been working on it for a while, but are feeling alone, can't access the capital. They're too small for VC, but they, the angel and the grant space is overwhelming. Like, how do you apply for IRA funds, right? Like, why isn't there a common app, right? My daughter's going through high school where you can just feed in your information once and then just have the right grant magically appear in front of you with the right funding. So there's so much opportunity that can be translated from the challenges that we're seeing women face as they come out of our program. But the whole purpose is to create a space where we can get women to get over those initial barriers of feeling alone, not feeling like they know what to do, like what are the innovation building blocks that I need to understand, the best practices of Silicon Valley, but infused with an earth-centered set of principles and a feminine side of leadership that is so critical, we think, to fix this imbalance of yin and yang energy that we're seeing out in the world, which is causing a lot of the problems that we're facing in climate.
Perfect. Thank you, Anu. So this is a question that I would welcome everyone to jump in on because we've gotten there seems to be quite a bit of interest, and this is not actually at all surprising from my interaction with climate founders. There's with people in, we've got a question from Marie. We've got a question from a couple others around the general area of nature-based solutions and ag. And so what I'm pulling up here, and Tim, let's just get started with you because this is CrowdSolve data. So why don't you set the stage for what we're looking at here in terms of like, maybe talk about what CrowdSolve is, how many founders on the platform, and then we can kind of drill into top impact sectors that you guys are seeing on your platform currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. And I wanted to shout out to Anu as well on having more underrepresented founders. One of the so Rob's question on what is CrowdSolve? We are a platform to help as many climate tech founders, climate resilience founders get a start, get a leg up, and get moving. We have about 380 innovations or innovators in our platform today that are moving through the 3 stages. We have automated curriculum. You saw the thing with how many 12 million people have accessed YC. We have curriculum with assistance, both AI assistance and mentor assistance, going through stages of ideate, build, and launch. And that is all kind of automated where you get automatic connection into mentors, and you're getting early AI feedback on your innovation as you're going through as well. And then you can upgrade into our membership that gives you synchronous programming, access to one-on-one with mentors, and all kinds of other things. But one of the really interesting things, and this was kind of reflecting back on what Anu said, is about 80% of our founders are underrepresented founders, just showing that the kind of traditional VC accelerator model is not helping a lot of founders who are not getting that leg up. So that's why we exist, is to help more and more founders get a leg up, get going, and then resulting in more shots on goal on climate, having a lot more innovation coming into there, which we think is one of the things that has to happen. In terms of this graph, which comes out of the CrowdSolve data, we're seeing, and this trend is staying pretty solid with us, that the top three, food, ag, and then circular economy, and then electric generation and electrifying everything, are kind of the biggest movement areas. They've been kind of the same over the last year or so with CrowdSolve. And just wanted to point out, I don't know if I have enough time here, Rob, but I was going to mention a couple of companies or a company in each of these sectors, which kind of exemplifies those things and kind of brings a little bit of color to them. So on the ag and ag tech, we've got a measurement company that has some patent pending technology that they basically can stick these little measurement rods in the ground everywhere, so you don't have to do like a very expensive collection of dirt soil samples from all over a farm or all over a forest or whatever to determine what the CO2 sequestration, and they're also able to measure nitrogen content and then use telemetry to basically roll that up and aggregate it. Just incredibly more efficient, really cool. Circular economy, we've got Phyla Feed out of South Africa, women-led, and they're basically taking black soldier flies and taking food waste or organic waste from restaurants and markets and grocery stores, and being able to use these soldier flies to reduce the amount of methane emissions coming out of that decomposing organic stuff. And then they're able to sell the black soldier flies as part of high protein pet feed, animal feed downstream. We also have Mars Materials, which came through and ended up getting a fellowship with Breakthrough Energy, went through the NREL Westgate program, and got several $1 million in funding recently down in Houston. Just interviewed with Bill Gates. So amazing entrepreneurs going through. They're essentially taking sequestered CO2 and turning it into the raw materials for carbon fiber manufacturing. So essentially creating carbon fiber out of thin air, if you will. Energy production, we've got Latimer Controls. Came out of Boulder, where I'm at today, and has an AI solution that is helping to predict what the energy output of solar farms is, and so it can more efficiently participate in the energy markets, especially the spot energy markets, predicting kind of that near-term energy output. Also, they went through Techstars after coming through CrowdSolve at the Alabama Energy program, and have gotten a $500,000 grant from the federal government, and now in pilot with Xcel Energy. Maven Energy also just got into this cohort of Techstars out of the last Boulder program, and they're looking at how you estimate and move forward on retrofitting houses so they're more heat efficient using heat pumps and all those things. So just amazing, as I got into this whole area after that conversation with my son, have become increasingly optimistic as we move forward. We need a lot more innovation and a lot more money pouring in, and all the amazing people on this call today are proof point that the people are moving in the right direction, and we're trying to innovate and trying to kind of move all of these things forward. So thanks everybody for participating today.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I want to kind of ping back over to Allison and then Anu. Based on what you're seeing in your respective domains, so Allison, in the kind of meetings that you're taking, perhaps maybe talk about how many companies you have in your portfolio currently, what is the composition of your portfolio. Anu, talk about the kind of applicants you're seeing for the greenhouse. Who are you accepting? what the kind of profile of the founder is that is a good fit for your program. And I'm just particularly curious if we just crosswalk back to the data that you see here around those food and ag, circular economy, and the broader electrification and grid stuff. Are you guys tracking to those categories in your respective domains, or are you seeing other verticals pop for you?
Yeah. Climate tech is really hard to segment because let's face it, like I said earlier, it's a little bit of addressing sort of the entire economy that needs to be transitioned, which is just about everything.
Right.
So we definitely do see a lot in food, ag, and land use, and we do actually use that exact category for it. We have a company called Real Data that focuses on onshore fish farming, and it's software that helps grow the fish, feed the fish, measure the fish. They have fish facial recognition technology, which say that comes fast. But so that is one of our portfolio companies that falls into this. We're continually looking for opportunities there, but it's not always something that there's a lot to do there, and some of it is I think that there's still a lot of government incentives and other things that are coming through that make it harder sometimes for some of the more commercial business models to break in. And over the years, farmers have been sold a lot of snake oil. So that's one of the challenges that we see there, but we love it. I'll step back for a minute, as you asked me to do, and just say, Buoyant is a $76 million fund. We plan to have low 20s of number of companies in our portfolio. We've made 13 investments in companies so far. So about halfway through. We do also see a lot, particularly since the IRA passing, in this electricity generation, transmission, storage area. That has been a huge topic. And if you think about it, there's so much to be done in terms of, where do you site generation assets? Where do you run the lines of those transmission and distribution things? How do you, unclog the interconnection queue so that all of these things can be connected in the right way? So there's a lot of work, and particularly for Buoyant, when we're focused on software, we're not focused on like a new hydrogen electrolyzer, because that's very hardware focused. We're focused on all the software that goes on top of it to make it more efficient. So I think because of our backgrounds, we do see a lot in this space, but also it's really been driven by the IRA, in the US at least. But then the EU's response with their own Green Deal was, I think another push. The built environment is another one we've done a lot in. Audette.io is an amazing company out of Canada. They're focused on decarbonizing the commercial real estate sector, and really thinking about they take satellite data and building footprint data, and then say, okay, which building, if you own 1,000 buildings, which ones need to be upgraded first, and what does that get you in terms of energy savings and carbon reduction? So these sorts of very accurate, but utilizing software, so much more efficient to look at broad swaths of data and lots of different entities at once, is where we're also really focused. Again, but I'll stop there.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Anu, let's go to you. Let's answer that first question, tracking back to those sectors. And then I'm going to actually put up another graph of a point that you made to me in preparation for this panel, talking about the sectors that have highest potential for emission reduction versus the sectors that how much capital is actually flowing into each, and the disconnect between those. So go ahead and start by answering that first question, and then we'll address that second issue.
Thank you. So the greenhouse is, 6 months old. We're just getting started here, and we've had about 55 women apply. 33 have actually gone through the program. Our goal is to get to 100 women founders this year. The applications that are coming in represent a broad variety of industries, as we like it, because as we know, climate is not fixing one industry or one sector. It's reimagining everything about how we live on this planet, how we eat, how we transport, how we heat ourselves, how we keep buildings cool. It's everything. So we love that diversity of ideas, though we do see a tracking to the slides that you shared earlier, Rob, on a little bit of a heavier skew towards food, ag, and land use, and then circular. But there's a long tail. I think the one area that I didn't see on your slide, which we are seeing some traction around, is corporate action. Like, how can we as communicators and educators activate employees and corporations to take more action, either through workshops or climate arts, or, there's so many different vehicles to do that. But women are also thinking about that piece of the puzzle, which is really important. And I would say that, in terms of like just a couple of examples, just to highlight the brilliance of the ideas that we're seeing. Jessie with Downland is in our cohort this time, and she's just done a soft community launch over the weekend where she is putting together a marketplace to help accelerate the regenerative practices of the next generation of farmers. So she's bringing together land, capital, and training into an accelerated program for farmers and launching that on WeFunder. I think it's available on WeFunder right now. So if you want to go find it, it's wefunder.com/Downland. And that's a classic example of systems thinking, right? Where you're not just thinking about solving for one piece of the puzzle, but thinking about all the pain points, all the unmet needs, looking at the data and the trends in this country where a lot of those farms are going to be passing generational hands over the coming years. And she's coming in and realizing that, catching farmers right at the beginning of their journey and setting them up for success with the best tools, resources, and capital can have such a huge impact on their long-term trajectory. So that's one example. Another one is a speaker we had, Christy Legali from Rebellious Foods, who just apparently got on the Time 100 innovation list, which is awesome. She used to be a Boeing mechanic, like, creating tools for building planes. She pivoted into food a couple of years ago, and she's building plant-based chicken nuggets for schools. That's the product. But she didn't just approach it thinking about the food and how do I make plant-based chicken nuggets delicious so kids would eat it. She also looked at the manufacturing and the technology that these plant-based nuggets were being built on and realized that you can't put you can get so much more cost effectiveness, 60% cost effectiveness, if you just reimagine the technology and the system. So she has re-engineered the machinery so that it's continuous rather than patch-based and designed with a plant-based food in mind. And she's winning, school budgets all over the country and doing really, really well. We have another woman in our cohort, Carmen, who's thinking about how do I make beans a staple part of our modern diet. So it's not a side dish, it's not an addition to your salad, but it's what you eat every night. So lots of different ideas, and we're really excited for the diversity, because that's, again, what we need. We're not going to solve this with one unicorn, right? We need lots and lots of different localized solutions that are diverse, that go after every aspect of human life and help us reimagine it in a way that is sustainable and is able to thrive. And the power of local communities is really where we see the biggest opportunity.
Thank you, Anu. So I've got a slide up here, and really the purpose around this slide is to kind of make the point around the importance of capital allocation as where we currently sit in terms of trying to figure out a decarbonized future. So a lot of people are on this call. A lot of people are trying to get in the climate space. A lot of people are trying to shift careers from doing something that they weren't passionate about to being part of the solution and try to get in and figure out their role in a future career or a current career in the climate space. So I have anxiety for my child about, what does the future hold from a climate perspective. But on a positive note, I always say this to young professionals that I mentor, and they come to me and ask me for advice. The good news is we've got a 70-30 dilemma here, right? 70% of our pathway to get to that original schematic around getting to net zero by some period of time, 2050 is a good benchmark, is solved for all intents and purposes. We pretty much have the technology we need. It's wind, it's EV, it's solar, it's hydro. That's going to take us about 70% of the way there for all intents and purposes, okay? So what we really need to figure out is the remaining 30%, okay? And so and that's going to be figuring out so some of that's knowns, like we know what we need to do in some of those areas. So then it's just about developing innovations that solves for those knowns. Some of it is doing research to figure out what are some of the unknowns that we then need to turn into knowns, so then we can create innovations around to eventually solve. And then there's the last mile of innovation that is going to be a challenge. That last 5 or 10% of getting to a net zero decarbonized world is going to be a challenge. Cement, steel, some of those real industrial sectors that are just super hard to decarbonize. I want to come back to, just anyone can jump on this. Does this, in your respective domains, from an accelerator lens, from a funder lens, from a founder lens, just that lay of the land there in terms of like, how do we close that last 30% of current and future innovation and get into that last mile of decarbonization? How does that factor into your daily or regular approach to working in the climate space?
I'm happy to jump on that quickly. I can speak
Please
to.
do.
Yeah. So Buoyant's thesis is founded on, coming from Accenture, I did not do systems implementation, but I saw the power of a large data platform or some sort of CRM system being implemented at corporations and how much efficiency that drove. And that's a few months of a timeline for in terms of deployment. If you want to go build power generation assets, that's years to go like get all of that done. So some of our thesis, or a lot of our thesis, really revolves around how do we use software, new business models, systems that can be deployed very, very quickly to really bring down as much mitigation as possible now, so that we can save time for things that are in the lab that are going to take a while to get out there. And they're kind of expensive right now and whatnot. And there's so many efficiencies that we think can be driven exactly like what you said, Rob, in terms of like, we have the solutions today. If we just keep pushing those forward and get the lowest hanging fruit first, we'll get up there, or they'll just start falling down because of declining prices and that sort of thing. One other thing I want to call out to this group is a few people were commenting, like, love to see the consulting background. I want to see the top talent come into the climate space, and I think it's happening, and it's so exciting to see, because there are a million different problems to solve for in climate at startups or at corporations, and it doesn't have to be specifically like you're going to be the carbon accounting expert necessarily. It could just be that you are the data expert, and then you're working with climate data. So I would encourage everyone to look into their background, take off the industry, take off the sector that skill was necessarily done in, because we need the best salespeople, the best marketers, the best broad leaders. We need finance. We need all of the different talents brought into the space, and focus on that as you're looking for climate jobs. I also threw in the Q&A, Microsoft, backer of Buoyant very proudly, but Microsoft and BCG did some amazing work around sustainability skills that are needed in the space. They also have Microsoft, remember they own LinkedIn, does a lot of trainings and certifications as well. And I think it's a great resource to also go to as you think about like, where should I be targeting my search and that sort of thing. But definitely don't discount any of the non-climate experiences that you have, because I think a lot of those are needed in the space, along with all the technical folks that are trying to do a lot of this already.
I think that's a great point. But also, I feel like I always have to say this. Everyone, if you're looking for a job in the climate, it's a very competitive space, right? There's more supply than there is demand at the moment. Now that's going to change, right? As we start to progress along the roadmap of decarbonization, more and more jobs are going to open up. Every job is going to become a climate job. So like the current state is not going to be the future state, but it is important that you all need to figure out, to Allison's point, like what's my secret sauce as a professional in the modern workplace, and then customize and cater that to fit particular positions that you come up. I will also say, and I'm also someone who does not have a technical background, there is a very strong bias generally writ large in the climate space for people with technical backgrounds. And if you don't have a technical background, it is a challenge to break into. So you have kind of figure out, okay, if you don't have an engineering or coding or hard science background, what's going to be my value proposition that I can bring to an employer? There's a few questions here. I want to make sure I get to Tim because he represents this founder perspective here. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call who are either early stage founders or thinking about starting something new. Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Okay. You've done 4 ventures. You've been doing this for longer than you care to remember, 20 years, to being founder for 20 years. What would you say is the top character trait or that you feel is necessary to be a successful founder?
I would say that the top character trait is being passionate and having the resilience to kind of carry that through. Starting companies is incredibly hard sledding. So you're gonna hit bumps, you're gonna hit friction, you're gonna hit glass ceilings, you're gonna hit all the imaginable things that are out there that can stop you, and you have to be unstoppable. You have to kind of feel like, you have to be also adaptive. So you take the information that is coming at you, and you're able to kind of pivot where you need to pivot. So that's the adaptable piece, but the kind of unwavering belief, not necessarily in the exact idea that you started with, but the exact idea that when you meet the marketplace and things start to click, you also have to have, in addition to the adaptability, this kind of figuring out the game, figuring out all the players and the pieces, and sort of unlocking, the next levels, the cheat codes, whatever you want to, sort of a game metaphor is, figuring out how you take this to market. What's the essential things that I can do to demonstrate what I'm capable of in the marketplace, and then getting those little green shoots, those seeds of momentum that then carry you forward and are able to. But then, when you're not going forward, plowing through, just continuing to go.
Thank you, Tim. I figured you would say that. We've talked about the importance of perseverance a lot in conversations we've had. Anu, we've gotten a couple different topics that seem to be threaded, so I'm going to have you address it. So there's some interest around the issue of how to incorporate environmental racism into kind of the innovation landscape around climate. And also, if you can also talk about this idea of greenwashing, that's kind of it's a thread in a lot of the questions here. Are like, I'm like, just give me your thoughts. Those are hard ones. Those are big topics, but just generally give some top of line, because I'm sure as someone who comes from the global South, from India, and you're working with a lot of founders globally, you've probably tackled some of those issues.
Yeah, so I think to keep it really, really short, a lot of the racism and the blockers that you see in life are, it's ignorance and it's lack of connection and like a deep understanding of each other. So I always bring it back to, like, how do you get over that by creating empathy for the person who is directing that racism towards you? How do you create connection, and how do you find a common ground? And I think when you're talking about things like climate, it affects all of us, right? It's not like it's one industry, one sector, one city. We're all impacted by this. So I think keeping that bigger vision, that bigger purpose for why we're all in this space, what we're trying to do, and why this is like so important for us to figure out collectively. And this whole notion of the industry, that the venture creation system that we've created, right? It's just not going to work for the kind of work that we need to get done to solve this problem. We need to reimagine the venture creation system, from who we let into the innovation arena, how we support and nurture their growth, how we support them at every stage, whether it's VC or angel or accountants or lawyers. I mean, how are we reimagining our processes to make this process, to help more businesses succeed? So I think the racism is real. It's we don't see a lot of diverse voices represented, and when you do try to work towards something, you have all these doors close on you. But I love this quote I picked up the other day, which is, if a door closes, just open it. That's how doors work, right? Like, just, you got to keep trying. You don't give up. There's too much at stake here, right? Let human sort of issues get in the way. We have to think broader and bigger and beyond that.
Great, thank you, Anu. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. I want to ask a question, another thread that's coming up in the Q&A this notion between short-termism and long-termism. And I think, Allison, you have to wrestle with this because you have your LPs that you have, your limited partners that you have to appease or provide return to. So they have maybe a little bit more of a short to midterm horizon versus a lot of these founders, ventures, technologies that you're supporting at an early stage seed, they could be 10, 15 years out. How do you manage the alignment or misalignment between those different like time horizons?
Yeah. And I'll quickly bring it back to like what I said earlier in terms of because we are focused on digital, which means, mostly software, sometimes small bits of hardware to connect the physical and digital world. We've aligned to the time horizon that our VC ventures, our VC investors expect. So it's a little bit different for us. I think that there's a lot of space out there, though, where there are different buckets of capital that are starting to align to some of the longer timeframes. Not enough, but hey, if we keep making things more efficient, if we keep going after that lowest hanging fruit, that's where I'm hoping that we can save as much time as possible for all of that, or help it be so efficient that it can come to market and have a shorter time frame when it starts.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's see if I've got any other questions here before we wrap it. Well, we've got, I don't know, I guess let's just quickly go around since we're kind of running up on time here. Just maybe let's focus on the career aspect, right? Because a lot of the people this is Climate Career Week, a lot of people are coming into this maybe either thinking about making a transition or they've been trying to make a transition for several months. So if you had some parting advice or pearls of wisdom, let's just go around. Let's go Anu, Allison, and Tim. Real succinctly, like what are maybe some resources, methods, tactics that might help if you want to be a founder, if you just want to get a job at a large company, if you want to work at a startup, whatever sort of the use case is.
So I'll go first. One word: community. Surround yourself, soak yourself, drown yourself in community, and the answers will come. None of us were meant to solve this on our own. We are much better when we are together. And I'd also say, don't just bet on one bet. I mean, look at my example. I was trying to become head of product at a climate tech startup. That's probably, future. I've had to park it for the future. Maybe that'll happen someday. Maybe that won't. But in the meanwhile, I don't give up on my quest to help solve this problem with everyone else around me, right? You've got to have other ideas, and you've got to be willing to take that leap with others, hand in hand, just jump off the cliff and see what magic happens, because it's incredible when you do that.
Great. So Anu says build community and network. Allison, what about you? What's your pearl of wisdom for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, hard to be an Anu's, because I think it is all about community and continuing. I will also say my own personal experience of being someone who never shut up about startups, regardless of where I was in my career, which being a management consultant or a strategy consultant at a utility, you get some weird looks. But I think still you just really have to focus on, like, I would say succinctly, sort of start where you are. If you're already in a job where, you can look across the corporation and see maybe where else you can get involved, or where in the community can you get involved, what's around you, and starting there, like I said, start with where you have the skills and start building on that. I think that's really, where you can kind of be from. And don't stop, keep talking about it. And I will also do a huge shout out to any founders on this call. You guys are doing the hardest work out there. What Tim mentioned in terms of resiliency, and I always call grit, in terms of it's hard, but you guys are doing the most beautiful thing out there, and I am cheering you on. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And then Tim, bring us home.
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone to get involved. Back to both Anu and Allison on community and all of that. So, the first step is joining the community, which you are all doing today. The second step is, if you if you already possess those skills in marketing or engineering or other areas, even if they're not engineering, they're needed in climate. And you can participate even if you can't find a job readily. You can be a mentor, right? You can jump into Terra.do's network or MCJ's network or CrowdSolve's network or wherever, and you can help companies out that are the startups that are doing that hard work that Allison talked about, and they need help. They need some guidance. They need a couple more hands-on that can help them do a couple of things that get to that next step. And if you have that wherewithal, if you've got a good idea, go pursue it. Don't necessarily quit your day job yet. Jump in and start working on that idea that really is giving you joy, giving you pleasure, giving you, a more optimistic outlook on your future because you're doing a thing, and get out there and give that a try. And if it starts gaining momentum, and jump on, use CrowdSolve, use whatever, and see if you can kind of move that thing a little bit forward and get a little bit of momentum and get some help from mentors. And now you've got a thing that you're bringing into the world, which is, as Allison said, a very beautiful and cool thing to do.
All right. Well, first, thank you, Anu, Allison, and Tim, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join me for this workshop. Hopefully you all found this somewhat valuable. We were only really able to scratch the surface of this topic. You've got our information up there. I'm sure feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with us. It's not a bad thing just to mention that, you came across us via this panel session at Climate Career Week, just so we have some context when we accept the connection request. So feel free to reach out to. We all have great resources. If you are at the start of your journey and you're thinking about trying something new, or you want to learn about the venture development building process, CrowdSolve is a great resource, so go there. If maybe you've been working on something for quite some time, you think you're getting close to product market fit, and you want to really accelerate your learning and get plugged into potential funders and other networks, Anu, go to the Greenhouse. If you're a woman climate founder, consider that. And then if you are further along and you feel like you're in a position to raise some capital, go to Allison for that. She'll, I don't want to say she'll take your meeting, because her calendar will get busy, but she's a great resource, and she's very willing to share her time and resources.
We respond to everyone that submits something on our website, so please go there as well.
Okay, go to website. Yes, good. So yeah, feel free to reach out to all of us. There's a lot of resources out there. I'm happy to share what I know, podcasts, online websites. There's just a plethora of resources out there, not least of which are the sponsors for Climate Career Week. So those are wonderful places to start. Terra.do, work on climate, all climate people, all that. Go there and get started. Thank you so much. We hope you found this informative. We wish you all the best on your climate journey, and don't be a stranger, and feel free to reach out to all of us. Take care.